So on Black Friday, my 4-year-old grandson in England comes bounding into our room. He says, "Get up, get up. It's Black Friday. Toys are disappearing off the shelves. Everything is little, little." We were happy to come home, although we miss him. Let me read to you from Isaiah this morning. "In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God makes salvations its walls and ramparts. Open the gates that the righteous nation may enter, the nation that keeps faith. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Trust in the Lord forever. For the Lord himself, he is the rock eternal. He humbles those who dwell on the high. He lays the lofty city low. He levels it to the ground and casts it down to the dust. Feet trample it down, the feet of the oppressed, the footsteps of the poor. The path of the righteous is level. You, the upright one, make the way of the righteous smooth. Yes, Lord, walking in the way of your laws, we wait for you. Your name and renown are the desire of our hearts. My soul yearns for you in the night. In the morning, my spirit longs for you. And when your judgments come upon the earth, the people of the world learn righteousness." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Long before The Voice, America's Got Talent, and American Idol. Even long before MTV began with their first video jockeys in 1981, some 30 years before that, it was Dick Clark and American Bandstand. Each week on their Rate a Record segment, Clark would interview two teenagers out of the studio dance audience about their opinions on the songs being played, asking them to rank two records on a scale of 35 to 98. Inevitably, though, those ratings would come down to one variation or another of a simple sentence. Some of you know it. It's got a good beat and you can dance to it. The teenagers on that show pretty much said that every week. Whether you could actually dance to the song or not, whether it even had a beat or not. Because their judgments were not entirely arbitrary, they were subjective. No common criteria at all. I have a feeling, however, that if any of those teenagers of old, who would now be in their 70s or 80s, by the way, if they had been asked to rate the songs of the Scripture that we're looking at during this season of Advent, they would have been stumped to say anything at all. Because you see, the truth is, the songs that show up in the Bible don't sound much like songs to us. They don't rhyme, at least in English. They don't appear to have any kind of cadence that we can readily detect. They don't generally talk about the kinds of subjects that our songs talk about, all those country, western, somebody done, somebody wrong songs. And yet, when the Israelites sang these long ago, these two were songs of the heart. Now, Isaiah, or as my good English son-in-law would call him, Isaiah, is better known in biblical circles for 4 or 5 other passages in his book, which are known as the servant poems or the songs of the suffering servant. Isaiah 42, for instance, talks about the servant who will bring justice to the earth. Isaiah 49, we hear how that servant has been equipped to restore the nation to God, not by political or military means, but by becoming a light unto the Gentiles of all people. The poem in the following chapter, Isaiah 50, takes a little darker turn. Begins to describe how the servant of the Lord will be beaten and abused. And the fourth song in Isaiah 52 and 53 presents an even clearer picture of that man of sorrows. Traditional Jewish readers have identified that servant to be the whole nation of Israel, while Christian interpreters have taken the suffering servant and the man of sorrows to be a reference unto Jesus. But before we read any of those songs, we find this one this morning, here in Isaiah 26. A song that will be sung, so the prophet tells us, in the land of Judah. Now let's set the context just a little further. We should remember that Isaiah lived in a time of uncertainty. He began his ministry during the years that Assyria virtually destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel in 721 BC, threatening to do the same to the people of the southern kingdom of Judah, where Isaiah was. Isaiah helped the king of Judah, Hezekiah, some of you have been in his tunnel, to avoid that fate, sparing Jerusalem from destruction. But in reality, it was only a stay of execution. For about 100 years after Isaiah, Judah too was invaded, not by the Assyrians this time, but by the Babylonians who had taken their place as the big dog on the world stage. And so though Judah was still yet sovereign when Isaiah wrote these words in chapter 26, they were far from secure. All of which is why Isaiah reminded them of two central truths. First, that those who trust in God will find him to not only be a rock eternal, but the source of perfect peace in their lives. And second, when you don't know what to do, the best thing you can do is to simply wait upon the Lord. So what do we mean by these things? Listen again to the lyrics of this ancient song. It begins by noting, we have a strong city for God made salvation its walls and ramparts. Now that may not mean a lot to those of us who live in sprawling suburbs, where the only ramparts we know are the freeway overpasses. And the only walls we may encounter are those that surround some of our gated communities. But those walls, of course, are not really all that secure, are they? In my neighborhood in Siena, there's a lovely section with walls that are a little bit taller than the rest of the section, and a gate that requires a code to enter it. But if you simply walk around it, there's no wall at all on one side of that section. You can walk right into it. Reminds me of the walk-in safe we had at Lon Morris College when I was president there many years ago. Looked like a bank deposit vault from the outside, thick steel with giant hinges, a combination that was so complicated I didn't know how to open it. But then I discovered that was only the front of the safe. The back side of that vault was simply a sheetrock wall that separated it from the office next door. One good body blow and you're in. In contrast, the walls of Jerusalem, they went all the way around that city. They were pretty massive indeed. Only 3 or 4 gates by which one could enter, each of which were well protected. So the inhabitants might have felt that they were pretty safe indeed when they were behind those walls, but so too did the inhabitants of the city of Moab, where the walls collapsed when God sent an earthquake. Everyone in Judah loved that, because nobody liked the Moabites. They were one of Israel's enemies. But what Isaiah tried to remind them of is that it's not the strength of the walls that matters when it comes to our safety. It's our relationship to God. Because what makes a city strong, Isaiah said, was when God made salvation the walls and the ramparts of such a place. And that's still the case today. Because frankly, we can't make any place completely safe in this world, can we? This past week, Pastor Michelle and Roland went to a seminar on church security put on by the county sheriff's office and others. And it was good of them to do this. It was helpful in many ways. But what their advice came down to when it comes to making churches secure from crazy people, and really churches are full of crazy people, aren't they? Yes. What we should do, they said, the experts, form a posse of sorts. Find out who's packing in your congregation and get them organized. Buy them walkie-talkies and have them patrol the services, guns in hand. And I suppose if we did that, some folks might indeed feel safer. In the tragic Texas church shooting, it appears that an armed neighbor did indeed prevent further deaths in that church. Likewise, we appreciate enormously the off-duty officers who are here every Sunday in our church. But I have to say that ultimately, I think the far greater threat to most churches is not firearms. It's lack of fire in the faith of those who come. Yes, we need to be careful and prudent, take whatever precautions we should, short of arming the ushers. But in the end, we put our trust in God, don't we? I'm going to go Baptist on you. Can I get an amen for that? Yes. We put our trust in God. Yes. Because then we can do two things. First, we can open the gates, as Isaiah said. I think that means in our context. Remember, God has called all kinds of people to make up his kingdom. So this should be a place where everyone feels welcome. Now, Christ Church has a wonderful history for this. Yesterday, we had a meeting here in our sanctuary, and it just so happened that 4 of the folks who were here were former pastors of this church. As they were walking in, Tom Pace commented, "What a beautiful church. I wonder who built this." And then Morris Mathis said, "It is a beautiful church. I wonder who paid for this." To which Keith Whitaker said, "It's a beautiful church. I wonder who dreamed of this." All I could say was, "It's a beautiful church. I wonder who recarpeted it." Yeah, we have a great heritage here. But the best history is always that which is waiting to be written. And I believe that God would say to us this morning that which he said to the people of Jerusalem through Isaiah so long ago. Open the gates so that the righteous nation may enter, those who keep faith. Now, notice this qualification of who the righteous are. It's not to say that everyone is the same, or that every belief system is equally valid and interchangeable. It is those who keep faith in God. But much to the surprise of many in Jerusalem who thought they were God's unique and only people, Isaiah reminded them the righteous nation was more than just them, and it's more than just us as well. Open the gates, Isaiah said. I wonder who we need to be opening our gates to this morning. That's the first question we should perhaps ask ourselves. Likewise, keep your mind stayed on God, because there's a powerful promise indeed in this verse, in this psalm. Verse 3 tells us, God will keep in perfect peace those whose hearts are steadfast. To keep means to guard or to protect something, like you might protect a castle or a camp. The enemy can't get in when God is protecting us. And the word perfect is not even found in this verse. The phrase perfect peace is literally shalom, shalom in Hebrew. That's how Hebrews amplified a word sometimes. They simply repeated it. Charles Spurgeon once said, God does nothing by halves, everything by doubles. And I think that is largely true. So if you want shalom, shalom, peace, peace in your life and in your heart, here's how you find it. You set your mind upon Jesus and you leave it there. There's a wonderful hymn in the evangelical tradition that's written by Francis Avergale. It's not in our Methodist repertoire, but we still sing it anyway from time to time because I just love it. Like a river glorious is God's perfect peace. Over all victorious in its bright increase. Perfect yet it floweth, fuller every day. Perfect yet it groweth, deeper all the way. And then the chorus says, stayed upon Jehovah, hearts are fully blessed, finding as he promised, perfect peace and rest. Trust in him and in him alone. Because I'm sorry to tell you, everybody else and everything else is undependable in this world. But he is a rock eternal. Which brings us to the second truth embodied in this old song of Isaiah. Verse 8, yes, Lord, walking in the way of your laws, we wait for you. And that is indeed what Advent is about. A season of waiting, of expectation, of anticipation, of holding steady, and of being ready. One of my favorite explorers was Sir Ernest Shackleton. His ship, the Endurance, became trapped while on a South Pole expedition long ago. His is an amazing story, but Shackleton was finally able to make his way back to Elephant Island, where he had left many of his men, promising that he would return. When he tried to go back, huge icebergs blocked the way until suddenly, as if by a miracle, an avenue opened up in the ice floe and Shackleton was able to get through. No sooner his men were there ready and waiting, and they quickly scrambled aboard. No sooner had the ship cleared the island, though, that the ice crashed together behind them, sealing it back up. Everyone was silent until Shackleton said, "It was fortunate you all were packed and ready to go." To which his men replied, "We never gave up hope. Whenever the sea was clear of ice, we rolled up our sleeping bag and reminded each other, he may come today." This season upon us is a time for us to similarly be ready and waiting. When we don't know what to do, the very best thing we can do is simply wait upon the Lord. The world is full of problems this morning. There's nothing a whole lot that most of us can do about any of them. What we can do is live out lives as faithfully and righteously as we know how to. Walking in the way of the Lord, trusting that he will one day make all things right. John Phillips writes in his book about the return of Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, to England during the time of the Crusades. While Richard was away doing battle in the Mideast, his kingdom fell on bad times. His brother, Prince John, whom most folks will know as the scoundrel from the tales of Robin Hood. Usurped the kingdom, misruled that realm. The people of England suffered under his leadership, longing for the return of their rightful king. They prayed that it might be soon, and then one day Richard came home. He landed in England, marched straight for his throne, easily pushing aside the forces of his brother's army. Richard the Lionheart laid claim to his kingdom, and no one dared to stand in his path. For the people all shouted their delight. They rang peal after peal on the church bells. The lion was back. Long live the king. John Phillips adds these hopeful words in his book. One day a king greater than Richard will lay claim to a realm greater than England. Those who have abused the earth in his absence, seized his domains, mismanaged his world, will all be swept aside. Even as we celebrate the first coming of that king long ago at Christmas, we should not forget that same king is coming back one day. And so our task is simply to watch and to wait, and until that, to live for him in this world. Maybe it's not a song that will send you out of the sanctuary humming this morning. You probably can't dance to it, unless, of course, you dance like I do. Having studied at the Cutter Rudd Dance Studio in Tomball, their motto is, if you have two left feet, bring us one and we'll make it right. But the song of Isaiah is one we should remember all the same. Put your trust in God this morning. He alone can make us secure in a rather unsecure world. Open the gates so that anyone and everyone who believes in him may find refuge in this place. And wait for the Lord. Even as we sing, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. All in all, I'd give it a 98 on the rate a record scale.